When my parents chose my sister's perfect wedding over my life-saving heart surgery, I learned the painful truth about where I stood in our family. 3 years later, they showed up at my door begging for help. My father needed the same surgery I had, and they wanted my connections and money. Little did they know, I had already prepared for this moment, and my response would change our family forever. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever had to stand up to family who took you for granted, hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories about finding your worth. Now, let me take you back to the day my world fell apart. It's a rare congenital heart condition, Natalie. We need to operate within the next month. Dr. Reed Bennett's words echoed in my ears as I sat alone in his office 3 years ago. At 29, I'd built a promising career as a marketing executive in Boston, and now my life was hanging by a thread. The symptoms had started subtly: shortness of breath climbing the stairs to my apartment, unusual fatigue after my morning jog, occasional chest pain I'd dismissed as anxiety from work deadlines. By the time I collapsed during a presentation and was rushed to Massachusetts General Hospital, the condition had progressed dangerously. The surgery has an 85% success rate, Dr. Bennett explained, his kind eyes meeting mine, but postponing it would drop those odds significantly each week we wait. I nodded, trying to process everything. When do we schedule it? He checked his calendar. We have an opening on June 15th. My stomach dropped. June 15th, my sister Vanessa's wedding day in Santorini. The date had been etched in our family calendar for over a year, with countdown reminders and constant updates about venue details, floral arrangements, and the exclusive guest list. I need to call my parents, I whispered. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with my phone in hand, rehearsing how to break the news. My parents, Thomas and Eleanor Wilson, had already invested nearly $50,000 in Vanessa's destination wedding. My father answered on the third ring. Natalie, we were just talking about the seating chart. Your mother wants to know if you'd mind sitting with the Hendersons, since you know their son from college. I took a deep breath. Dad, I need to tell you and Mom something important. Can you put me on speaker? The conversation that followed started with shock and concern. My mother gasped at the diagnosis, while my father asked detailed questions about treatment options and recovery timelines. They promised to book flights back from their pre-wedding vacation in Italy immediately. We'll figure this out together, my mother said, her voice cracking. Family comes first. For a brief, beautiful moment, I believed her. 3 days later, they requested a family Zoom call. Vanessa joined from her bridal shower in New York, looking annoyed at the interruption. My parents appeared tense, sitting close together on their hotel balcony in Rome. We've been discussing the situation, my father began, not quite meeting my eyes. And we've come to a decision that's best for everyone. My mother jumped in, her voice overly bright. Natalie, honey, we've spoken with your Aunt Judith, and she's happy to stay with you during the surgery. She'll take wonderful care of you. The realization hit me like a physical blow. You're still going to the wedding. Sweetheart, Vanessa has been planning this for years, my mother explained, twisting her pearl necklace. A nervous habit since childhood. We've already paid deposits we can't get back, and the whole family is counting on being there. It's my heart surgery, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The doctor said it's life-threatening if postponed. Don't be dramatic, Vanessa interjected, rolling her eyes. Aunt Judith raised 4 kids. She knows how to take care of people. Besides, I'm only getting married once. My father cleared his throat. The timing is unfortunate, but we'll be back right after the honeymoon to help with your recovery. It's just 2 weeks. 2 weeks during which I could die, I said flatly. My mother flinched. That's not fair, Natalie. We're trying to be there for both our daughters. No, you're choosing one daughter over the other, I replied, tears welling in my eyes. And not for the first time. The call ended with tense goodbyes and promises to check in regularly. After hanging up, I sat in my living room for hours, staring at the wall. Years of being the responsible one, the one who never caused trouble, the one whose achievements were acknowledged with distracted nods while Vanessa's smallest accomplishments warranted celebration dinners. It all crystallized in that moment. The day of my surgery arrived with a beautiful summer sunrise. As the nurses prepped me for the procedure, I scrolled through Instagram one last time. My feed was flooded with photos from Santorini, my sister in her designer gown against the backdrop of white buildings and blue sea, my parents beaming proudly beside her, champagne flutes raised in celebration. The last image I saw before handing my phone to Maya, my best friend who had taken 2 weeks off work to be with me, was a family photo captioned, "The perfect day for our perfect girl." #Vanessa. As they wheeled me toward the operating room, a nurse asked, "Is anyone else coming to wait with your friend?" I closed my eyes, swallowing the lump in my throat.
No.
No one else is coming. The anesthesiologist counted backward from 10 as a cold sensation crept up my arm. I only made it to 7 before darkness enveloped me, but not before a final thought flickered through my mind. What if I don't wake up, and the last thing my parents did was choose a party over saying goodbye? The surgery lasted 12 hours, for longer than expected due to complications. I have fragmented memories of semi-consciousness, beeping machines, urgent voices, the metallic taste of blood in my mouth, and the crushing pressure on my chest. Later, Dr. Bennett would tell me they nearly lost me twice on the table. When I finally woke up in the recovery room, Maya's worried face was the first thing I saw. Her curly hair was pulled into a messy bun, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't slept. "Hey there, fighter," she whispered, carefully taking my hand between hers. "You made it." I tried to speak, but my throat was raw from the intubation. Maya offered ice chips and gently explained that the surgery had been more complicated than anticipated, but Dr. Bennett believed they'd successfully repaired the defect. "Your parents called," she said hesitantly. "They send their love and prayers. Your mom said they'll try to FaceTime tomorrow during the reception." The pain medication could numb the ache in my heart. Aunt Judith appeared briefly the next day, bringing flowers and a casserole I wouldn't be able to eat for weeks. She stayed for exactly 45 minutes, checking her watch repeatedly. "I hate to rush off, dear, but I have that Alaskan cruise, you know. Been planning it for months with the church group. I've arranged for a home health aide to check in daily, though. Your parents are covering it." She patted my hand. They do care in their way. After she left, Maya found me silently crying, the movement sending daggers of pain through my sutured chest. "They're not worth your tears," she said firmly, helping me adjust the pillows. "Focus on healing. I'm not going anywhere." True to her word, Maya became my lifeline over the next 2 weeks. She slept on the uncomfortable hospital recliner, helped the nurses turn me to prevent bed sores, and advocated fiercely when my pain management was inadequate. She set up a workstation in my hospital room, taking calls between helping me with breathing exercises and walking the hallway for rehabilitation. The recovery was brutal. An infection developed along my sternum, requiring additional procedures and antibiotics that made me violently ill. Each time I vomited, the strain on my healing chest felt like being torn open anew. The doctors became concerned about my heart rhythm, installing a temporary monitor that required twice daily readings. Through it all, my phone remained conspicuously quiet. My parents sent occasional text messages. Always brief, always containing the phrase "thoughts and prayers," as if they were distant acquaintances rather than the people who raised me. They sent a large flower arrangement to the hospital with a card signed by the entire wedding party. Vanessa called once from her honeymoon in Bali, the conversation lasting exactly 7 minutes. "The wedding was magical," she gushed, not waiting for me to ask. "Brandon's vows made everyone cry, and the sunset during our first dance couldn't have been more perfect. How are you feeling? The hospital food must be awful." "I almost died, Vanessa," I said quietly. "Don't exaggerate," she replied with a nervous laugh. "Mom said everything went fine. Anyway, I should go. We have a couples massage in 5 minutes. Love you, sis." 3 weeks after surgery, I was discharged with a long list of restrictions and follow-up appointments. My apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building without an elevator, impossible in my condition. Maya helped me find a temporary ground floor unit and organized a small group of colleagues to move essential items. Dr. Bennett surprised me by stopping by the day after I got home, ostensibly to check my incision but staying much longer than necessary. He brought proper coffee. Hospital coffee is a crime against humanity, and sat on my small balcony talking about books and music rather than my medical condition. His kindness was a balm during those dark days. The home health aide, Patricia, came daily to change dressings and monitor my progress, but the lonely evenings stretched endlessly. I developed insomnia, afraid to sleep because of recurring nightmares about being cut open and abandoned. 6 weeks after the surgery, my parents returned from Europe, thoroughly tanned and laden with souvenirs. They visited once, staying less than an hour and looking uncomfortable in my small apartment. "We brought you olive oil from Greece," my mother said brightly, avoiding looking at the angry red scar visible above my shirt collar. "And some lovely Santorini wine for when you're off medication." "The ceremony was beautiful," my father added, as if I'd asked. "Shame you missed it." I stared at them, these strangers who shared my DNA, but couldn't seem to see me as a person with needs separate from their expectations. In that moment, something shifted irrevocably inside me. After they left, I blocked their numbers and email addresses. I sent a brief message first. "I need time to heal in all ways. Please respect my space." That night, I sat with Maya on my balcony as the summer sun set, a blanket wrapped around my shoulders despite the warm evening. "I'm done," I told her, my voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "I can't keep pouring energy into people who see me as an afterthought." Maya nodded, understanding without judgment. "What's next, then?" I looked out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the growing darkness. I rebuild, on my terms this time. 3 years passed quicker than I could have imagined. My new apartment in Cambridge overlooked the Charles River, a daily reminder of how far I'd come. The promotion to senior marketing director at Horizon Media had come with a comfortable salary increase, allowing me to finally create a home that felt truly mine. My living room walls, once bare, now displayed framed photos of what I'd come to call my chosen family. Maya and her fiancé Zach building a lopsided snowman in my front yard last winter, my coworker Parker and his husband Luis teaching me to make paella, Dr. Bennett Reed, as I now called him, caught mid-laugh on our hiking trip to the White Mountains once my cardiologist cleared me for strenuous activity. The silver line of my chest scar had faded to a pale reminder, visible only when I wore V-neck tops. Sometimes, looking at it in the mirror, I'd trace its path with my fingertip, not with shame but with pride. It marked the beginning of my rebirth. "Earth to Natalie." Maya waved her hand in front of my face, bringing me back to the present. "You're doing that 1,000-yard stare again. The lasagna's getting cold." I smiled, returning to our Friday dinner tradition. For 3 years, this weekly gathering had anchored me, my chosen family crammed around my dining table, sharing food and stories from the week. "Sorry, just thinking about the support group meeting tomorrow," I said, accepting a pasta dish Maya passed. This wasn't entirely untrue. I had founded Heart Forward 6 months after my surgery, connecting patients facing similar procedures. What had started as informal coffee meetings had grown into a recognized support network with hospital affiliation. "How many people are you expecting?" asked Reed, who occasionally attended as a medical advisor. "About 15, including 3 new referrals," I replied, including a 19-year-old girl who reminds me so much of myself. Terrified, but trying not to show it. "You're making a difference," Reed said, his eyes warm with something more than friendly admiration. Our relationship had evolved gradually, coffee after my checkups becoming dinner, becoming weekend outings, becoming comfortable silences and shared glances that held conversations without words. "Speaking of making a difference," Zach interjected, "did you see that grant proposal got approved? The foundation's funding the entire pediatric program." I hadn't just rebuilt my career, I'd redirected it. While maintaining my marketing position, I'd also established a small foundation channeling corporate funds toward patient advocacy programs. The work filled a void I hadn't recognized before my surgery, the need to transform my trauma into purpose. "Any news from the family front?" Parker asked carefully, knowing it was a sensitive subject. I shook my head. "Nothing direct. Claudia from accounting ran into my cousin at a wedding last month. Apparently, Vanessa and Brandon are having problems. He was caught with his assistant at a hotel in Chicago. Karma, Maya muttered under her breath. I didn't correct her, though I took no pleasure in my sister's pain. The distance I'd established hadn't been about punishment, but self-preservation. Occasionally, I'd feel a pang of curiosity about my parents' lives, but the few times I'd weakened and checked social media had shown them continuing as before, endless vacations, country club photos, and proud posts about Vanessa's interior design business that Thomas had financed as a wedding gift. Let's change the subject, I suggested. It's my birthday dinner after all. Maya grinned and disappeared into the kitchen, returning with a chocolate cake blazing with candles. Make a wish. As my friends sang, I closed my eyes, thinking of the forgotten birthdays of my childhood. My 16th overshadowed by Vanessa's dance recital, my 21st barely acknowledged because it fell during their anniversary cruise. How different it felt to be celebrated fully, without competition or conditions. After dinner, Reed stayed behind to help clean up, our easy domesticity a comfortable rhythm we'd fallen into. As he loaded the dishwasher, my phone buzzed with a voicemail notification from an unknown number. Probably a spam call, I said, but something compelled me to listen. Natalie, it's Mom. Eleanor's voice sounded older, strained. I know it's been a long time, and that's our fault. We've done a lot of thinking, and we'd like to see you. Please call us back. It's important. I set the phone down slowly, feeling the familiar tightness in my chest that had nothing to do with my heart condition. Bad news? Reed asked, drying his hands on a kitchen towel. My mother, I replied, leaning against the counter for support. After 3 years of silence, she wants to talk. Reed's expression remained neutral. Are you going to call her back? I stared at the phone, 3 years of carefully constructed boundaries suddenly under threat. I don't know. The decision was made for me the next morning when an insistent knocking woke me early. Through the peephole, I saw them, Thomas and Eleanor Wilson, looking older and more careworn than I remembered, standing awkwardly in the hallway of a building they'd never visited. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. Natalie, my mother breathed, as if she couldn't quite believe I was real. Her hair had more gray than I remembered, and fine lines creased the corners of her eyes. She wore her signature pearl necklace, but her designer clothes looked slightly dated, lacking the meticulous coordination I associated with her. My father stood slightly behind her, his once commanding presence diminished somehow. He'd lost weight, his cheeks hollowed beneath his salt and pepper beard. May we come in? He asked, his voice raspier than I remembered. For a moment, I considered closing the door. 3 years of silence couldn't be erased with a surprise visit. But curiosity won out, and I stepped aside to let them enter. They moved tentatively into my living room, taking in the tasteful furnishings and river view with poorly disguised surprise. Your place is lovely, my mother offered, perching on the edge of my sofa. Very sophisticated. Thank you, I replied, remaining standing. Would you like coffee? The forced pleasantries continued through the preparation of drinks, commenting on the weather, my mother asking about my job with exaggerated interest. I answered politely but briefly, maintaining the emotional distance I'd cultivated over 3 years of therapy. You look wonderful, my father said, his eyes lingering on the faint scar visible at my neckline. Healthy. I am, I confirmed. Regular checkups, medication management, careful diet, and exercise. The surgery was successful, despite the complications. The unspoken accusation hung in the air, complications they hadn't been present to witness or help me through. We've followed your career, you know, my mother interjected brightly. Thomas saw that article about your marketing campaign in Business Weekly. We were so proud. The familiar pattern emerged, my parents' selective interest, appearing only when there was something to brag about. It reminded me of my childhood piano recitals, which they attended only when I played solo pieces they could mention at dinner parties, not the regular practices or smaller performances. How's Vanessa? I asked, changing the subject. My parents exchanged a glance. She's adjusting, My mother said carefully. The divorce was finalized last month. I'm sorry to hear that, I said and meant it. Despite everything, I didn't wish unhappiness on my sister. Actually, that's partly why we're here, my father began, setting down his coffee cup. Vanessa's going through a difficult time. Brandon's lawyer was quite aggressive about the prenup, and she's having to downsize considerably. I waited, sensing where this was heading. We thought perhaps, with your spare bedroom and all the space. My mother gestured around the apartment. She might stay with you for a while. Just until she finds her footing. The audacity was breathtaking. 3 years of silence, and their first request was for me to house the sister who had shown such little concern during my life-threatening illness. That's not possible, I said evenly. I use the second bedroom as my home office. My father leaned forward, adopting the persuasive tone he'd used in his corporate negotiations. Natalie, families should support each other during hard times. Your sister needs help. The irony was too much. Like you supported me during my surgery? My mother flinched. We made a mistake. We've come to make amends. Have you? I asked, studying their faces. Because it sounds like you've come to ask for favors. My father sighed heavily, exchanging another look with my mother. There's something else we need to discuss. He hesitated, then unbuttoned the top of his shirt to reveal a surgical scar mirroring my own. I was diagnosed 6 months ago, he said quietly. Same condition as yours. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Despite everything, I felt a rush of concern. Have you had surgery? He shook his head. That's part of why we're here. My cardiologist is recommending Dr. Leslie Murphy at Boston Memorial, but there's a waiting list. When we mentioned you'd had the same procedure, he said your doctor, Bennett, has the best outcomes for this particular surgery. We were hoping you might talk to him, my mother added quickly. See if he could take your father as a patient. Insurance is covering some, but not all of the specialized care he needs. And there it was, the real reason for their sudden reappearance in my life. Not reconciliation, not genuine remorse, but access to my connections and, undoubtedly, my financial resources. The procedures and recovery are quite costly, my father confirmed, as if reading my thoughts. Even with liquidating some investments, we're looking at significant out-of-pocket expenses. I stood up, needing physical distance. Let me understand this correctly. You've ignored me for 3 years, and now you want me to use my relationship with my doctor to help you jump a waiting list, and you want financial assistance for the same procedure you left me to face alone. When you put it that way, it sounds terrible, my mother protested. How else should I put it? I asked, my voice steady despite the emotions roiling inside me. We're still your parents, my father said, an edge of the familiar authority creeping into his tone. Despite our mistakes, that hasn't changed. I looked at them, really looked, and saw not the towering figures of my childhood but 2 aging, frightened people who still, even now, saw me primarily as a resource rather than a daughter they'd wounded deeply. I need time to think, I said finally. This is a lot to process. They left reluctantly, my mother pressing her business card into my hand with their new contact information, extracting a promise that I would call soon. As the door closed behind them, I sank onto my sofa, the fragile peace I'd built suddenly threatened by the past I'd worked so hard to move beyond. The apartment felt different after they left, as if their presence had disturbed some invisible balance I'd carefully maintained. I paced restlessly, finally grabbing my keys and heading to the riverside path, where I did my thinking. The October air was crisp, leaves crunching beneath my running shoes, as I followed the familiar route. 3 miles in, my phone buzzed with a text from Maya. SOS dinner? Bringing Thai food and wine. Maya arrived at 7, arms laden with takeout bags and a sympathetic expression. Spill, she commanded, unpacking containers on my kitchen counter. I recounted the visit in detail, watching her expression shift from surprise to indignation. The absolute nerve, she fumed, pouring generous glasses of wine. 3 years of nothing, and they show up asking for money and medical favors? After what they did. He has the same condition I had, I said quietly. I know exactly how frightening that diagnosis is. Maya's expression softened. That's because you have empathy, not something they clearly lack. She handed me a plate of pad thai. What are you thinking of doing? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to tell them to figure it out themselves, like I had to. But another part feels obligated, Maya finished. Because they're family. I nodded, remembering other instances when my needs had been sacrificed for Vanessa's. My college graduation, which my mother had missed for Vanessa's shopping trip for her first apartment. The writing fellowship I'd won, celebration dinner canceled because Vanessa had broken up with her boyfriend and needed consoling. A lifetime of being reliable, responsible Natalie, who would understand why her achievements merited less attention. Dr. Klein says I need to recognize the pattern of emotional neglect, I said, referring to my therapist. That helping them now might reinforce the dynamic where my needs always come second. What does Reed think? Maya asked. I haven't told him yet. He's on call tonight. I push my food around the plate. I'm afraid he'll feel pressured professionally if I ask about taking my father as a patient. That night, sleep eluded me. I dreamed of the surgery, the cold operating room, the mask over my face, the terrifying moment of surrender to unconsciousness, not knowing if I'd wake up. In the dream, I opened my eyes to an empty recovery room, monitors beeping in the darkness, no one responding to my calls for help. I woke gasping, sheets twisted around my legs, and spent the rest of the night researching my father's condition. The prognosis without surgery was poor, the same ticking clock I had faced. The thought of anyone enduring that fear, even Thomas Wilson, sat uneasily with me. The next morning, I called Reed, who listened without interruption as I explained the situation. I would never ask you to compromise your professional ethics, I concluded. I just needed to talk this through with someone who understands the medical side. Your father would be evaluated like any other patient, Reed said carefully. If his case merits priority, that would be determined clinically, not based on personal connections. And if it doesn't, then he'd be placed on the waiting list according to standard protocols. He paused. Natalie, whatever you decide about helping your family, I support you. But don't let guilt drive your decision. Later that afternoon, I met with Victoria Spencer, my financial advisor, to understand the implications of potentially helping with my father's medical expenses. You could afford it, she confirmed, reviewing my accounts. The foundation is separate, so this wouldn't impact those funds. But it would delay your own plans considerably, the sabbatical you wanted to take, the condo down payment. I nodded, thinking of the goals I'd worked toward since the surgery. The freedom and security I'd built for myself, brick by careful brick. My final consultation was with Dr. Samantha Klein, who had helped me navigate the complex emotions following my family's abandonment. What would genuine forgiveness look like in this situation? She asked, her office as calm and neutral as her expression. I don't know if forgiveness is possible, I admitted. But I keep thinking about who I want to be. If I refuse to help, am I perpetuating the same kind of selfishness they showed me? There's a difference between setting boundaries and being selfish, Dr. Klein reminded me. You can offer help with conditions that protect your well-being. As our session ended, she asked, have you spoken with your sister directly? Her perspective might be valuable before you make any decisions. The suggestion resonated. Before confronting my parents, I needed to understand the full picture, including Vanessa's role in the family dynamics that had caused so much pain. That evening, I texted a number I hadn't used in 3 years. We should talk. Coffee tomorrow? To my surprise, Vanessa responded almost immediately. Yes. Please. Name the place. I chose a quiet cafe in Cambridge, arriving early to secure a corner table away from the morning rush. When Vanessa walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. Gone were the designer clothes and perfectly styled hair. She looked thinner, her face drawn, wearing simple jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. Natalie, she said, an uncertain smile flickering across her face. Thank you for meeting me. I gestured to the chair across from me, studying the sister I hadn't seen in 3 years. Despite the circumstances, She still carried herself with a confidence that had always come naturally to her, the invisible crown our parents had placed on her head from childhood. We exchanged awkward pleasantries about the weather and the cafe's pastries, dancing around the elephant in the room. Finally, I cut to the chase. "Mom and Dad came to see me," I said. "They mentioned your divorce." "I'm sorry about that." Vanessa's smile faltered. "Are you? I wouldn't blame you if you weren't. Brandon was always a jerk. You tried to tell me that before the engagement." The unexpected acknowledgement surprised me. They also mentioned Dad's heart condition. "Yeah," she sighed, stirring her latte absently. "It's been scary. Mom's completely overwhelmed, and Dad, he's not handling the role reversal well. Being vulnerable doesn't suit him." "They want my help," I said flatly. "Both for you and for him." Vanessa winced. "I told them not to ask you about me staying with you. That was their idea, not mine." I studied her face, looking for signs of the manipulation I'd grown up with, but found only exhaustion and what appeared to be genuine remorse. "Why did you agree to meet me today?" I asked. She looked down at her coffee. "Because I owe you an apology. A big one." "For what specifically?" I pressed, needing clarity after years of gaslighting and dismissed feelings. "For the wedding," she said quietly. "For deliberately scheduling it when I did." The admission hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean, deliberately?" Vanessa met my eyes, her own filling with tears. "I knew about your surgery date before I finalized the wedding. Mom mentioned you were having some tests done, so I called the hospital pretending to be your emergency contact. The scheduling nurse told me about the June 15th date." My hands began to shake, coffee sloshing over the rim of my cup. "You deliberately scheduled your wedding to conflict with my surgery? Why?" "Because I'm a terrible person," she whispered, tears now falling freely. "Because I was jealous." "Jealous? Of what?" "You were the golden child. You got everything you ever wanted. Of your independence," she said. "Your success that you earned yourself. Dad bankrolled my entire life, my apartment, my business, everything. Nothing I achieved was really mine." She wiped her eyes with a napkin. "When you got that promotion at Horizon, they were so proud. In a way they never were about anything I did. So when I heard about your surgery, you made sure they had to choose." I finished, the realization washing over me like ice water. She nodded miserably. "I knew they'd choose me. They always had. It was the one thing I could count on." Anger, hot and clarifying, surged through me. "Do you have any idea what that did to me? How it felt to go through that alone? I nearly died on that operating table, Vanessa." "I know," she whispered. "When Mom got the call that there were complications, she fell apart. They almost left the reception to fly back, but then the hospital called again saying you were stable. The knowledge that they had at least considered returning was a small, painful comfort. After, when you cut contact, I've never seen them so confused. They genuinely didn't understand why you were so upset. In their minds, they had arranged for Aunt Judith, paid for the home health aid. They thought that was enough." "It wasn't about the practical help," I said, my voice tight. "It was about being there. About showing up when it matters." Vanessa nodded, looking down at her hands. "For what it's worth, the perfect wedding led to a disaster marriage. Brandon cheated repeatedly, gambled away most of our savings, and left me with nothing but debt and trust issues. Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy. I really am sorry about that. The irony is, you're the only family member who probably understands how it feels to be abandoned when you're at your most vulnerable." She hesitated. "There's something else you should know. About Mom and Dad coming to see you." "What?" "They told me you refused to help Dad, that you'd turn them away without even considering it. That's why I reached out separately. I wanted to hear your side." The manipulation was so familiar it almost made me laugh. "They left my apartment less than 48 hours ago. I told them I needed time to think." Vanessa's expression hardened. "They're playing us against each other. Still." For the first time in years, I felt a genuine connection with my sister, both of us pawns in our parents' emotional chess game. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "About Dad's treatment, I mean." I considered the question, turning my coffee cup slowly. I don't know yet, but I'm not making any decisions based on guilt or obligation. Those days are over. As our conversation wound down, Vanessa hesitated by the door. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I am truly sorry, Natalie. For the wedding, for not calling more during your recovery, for everything. I looked at my sister, flawed, human, and for perhaps the first time, honest. This conversation is a start. A small one. Could we maybe try again sometime? She asked tentatively. Maybe, I replied, not ready to commit but no longer completely closed to the possibility. Separately from Mom and Dad. She nodded, understanding the distinction. I'd like that. As I watched her walk away, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the first step toward a new kind of relationship, based on truth rather than the roles we'd been assigned in childhood. I pulled out my phone and texted Maya. Met with Vanessa. It's time to make a plan. The next week was a whirlwind of consultations and research as I prepared for what I knew would be a defining confrontation with my parents. I approached it methodically, the way I would a complex marketing campaign, gathering information and resources to support my position. First, I met with Maya for emotional preparation. We sat in her apartment, mapping out potential scenarios and responses. They'll try to make you feel guilty, she warned, knowing my parents' tactics from years of friendship. They'll bring up everything they ever did for you as a child, as if providing basic care entitles them to unlimited support as adults. I know, I nodded, jotting notes. And they'll minimize what happened with the surgery, make it sound like I'm holding a grudge over nothing. What's your bottom line? Maya asked. The absolute minimum and maximum you're willing to do? I considered the question carefully. Minimum is providing information about patient advocacy programs and alternative treatment options. Maximum is limited financial assistance with strict boundaries and only if they acknowledge the harm they caused. Next, I consulted Reed about the medical aspects. Over dinner at his place, he outlined options that wouldn't require his direct involvement. There's a clinical trial at Mass General that's showing promising results for patients with your father's specific condition, he explained, showing me the research papers. The treatment protocol is slightly different from standard care, but the outcomes data is excellent. And it's fully funded for qualified participants. Would he qualify? Based on what you've told me, probably. I can provide the referral information without directly intervening. My colleague Parker, whose husband was a healthcare attorney, offered insights over lunch the following day. If you do provide financial assistance, create a formal agreement, he advised. Specify exactly what expenses you're covering and for how long. Otherwise, it could become an open-ended obligation. He slid a business card across the table. Louise knows a good mediator who specializes in family financial agreements. She could help structure something that protects everyone's interests. I spent evenings researching heart patient advocacy programs, compiling a comprehensive list of resources my father could access without my intervention. I created a folder with information on support groups, financial assistance programs, and specialized cardiac rehabilitation services. For comparison, I gathered documentation of my own medical expenses from 3 years ago, the bills my parents had never asked about, the follow-up treatments they'd never been involved with, the financial strain I'd managed alone while establishing my foundation. By Friday, I was ready to set the terms of engagement. I reserved a private room at Riverview Restaurant, neutral territory, where we could speak without interruptions or the power dynamics of being in someone's home. Are you sure you don't want me to come with you? Maya asked during our final strategy session. I shook my head. I need to do this alone. But I'd appreciate you being on standby. The night before the meeting, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, reviewing my notes one last time. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Whatever you decide tomorrow, I support you. They don't get to dictate the terms anymore. Her unexpected alliance gave me strength. I slept soundly for the first time since my parents' reappearance, waking with clarity rather than anxiety. As I dressed for the meeting, I chose my outfit deliberately, a sleek blazer over a V-neck blouse that left my surgical scar visible. A small detail, but a meaningful reminder of what I had overcome, with or without their support. On the drive to the restaurant, I reflected on how different this confrontation felt from our interactions throughout my life. For once, I wasn't seeking their approval or acceptance. I was establishing boundaries based on my worth, not their assessment of it. I arrived early, confirming the private room arrangements and ordering water for the table. As I waited, I touched the scar at my collarbone, a badge of survival, a reminder of my strength. When the door opened, I was surprised to see not just my parents but Vanessa as well, her expression resolute as she met my eyes across the room. "I hope you don't mind that I came," she said quietly, taking the seat beside me rather than next to our parents. "I thought it was time we all talked honestly." My mother looked between us with narrowed eyes, clearly unsettled by our unexpected alliance. My father, looking paler and more fragile than during their visit to my apartment, straightened his shoulders in the familiar posture of authority. "Well," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Shall we begin?" #9. The final confrontation and resolution. The waiter had just finished pouring water and departed when my father leaned forward, his expression conciliatory but confident, the same look he'd worn when negotiating business deals throughout my childhood. "Natalie, we've given you time to think about our discussion," he began, his tone suggesting the outcome was a foregone conclusion. "We're hoping you've come to a decision about helping the family during this difficult time." My mother nodded encouragingly. "We've always been there for you, sweetheart. Family supports family." The familiar script might have worked in the past, triggering my lifelong pattern of compliance and need for approval. But 3 years of therapy and self-discovery had immunized me against their manipulation. "Before we discuss any decisions," I said calmly, "I'd like to establish some parameters for our conversation." My father's eyebrows rose in surprise. Beside me, Vanessa shifted slightly closer in silent support. "I've prepared some information that I think will be helpful," I continued, opening the folder I'd brought. "First, regarding your medical situation, Dad." I placed a document before him. "This is information about a clinical trial at Mass General specifically for patients with your condition. The outcomes are excellent, and participants receive treatment at no cost if they qualify, which I believe you would." My father glanced at the papers with undisguised skepticism. "I prefer conventional treatment with an established surgeon. You're Dr. Bennett." Dr. Bennett maintains professional boundaries with all patients and doesn't provide preferential treatment based on personal connections, I interrupted. "He would tell you this himself if you consulted with him through proper channels." "But surely," my mother began. "Additionally," I continued, placing another document on the table, "here's information about the Cardiac Patient Advocacy Network, which provides financial counseling, insurance navigation, and support services for patients and families." My parents exchanged glances, their confident expressions faltering as they realized this meeting wasn't proceeding as they'd anticipated. "Natalie," my mother said, her voice taking on the emotional tremor I recognized from countless childhood negotiations, "we appreciate the research, but what we really need is your help. Your father's condition is serious, and time is of the essence." "I understand the seriousness," I replied, touching my scar deliberately. "I lived through it, alone." The pointed reminder hung in the air for a moment. "That was different," my father dismissed with a wave of his hand. "We had Vanessa's wedding, an important family obligation." "Which I deliberately scheduled to conflict," Vanessa interjected, her voice quiet but firm. "I told Natalie everything, Dad, about how I knew about her surgery date beforehand." My mother paled. "Vanessa, why would you?" "Because it's time for honesty," my sister replied. "I was wrong and you were wrong and we all know it." My father's expression hardened. "This isn't productive. We're here to discuss current circumstances, not relitigate the past." "The past informs the present," I said evenly, "especially when the patterns remain unchanged." I withdrew another document from my folder, a spreadsheet detailing my own medical expenses from 3 years ago. "This is what my life-saving surgery and recovery cost," I explained. "Over $287,000, most covered by insurance, but leaving me with nearly $63,000 in out-of-pocket expenses that I managed alone while building my career and foundation. My parents stared at the figures, perhaps seeing for the first time the concrete reality of what their absence had meant. "We didn't realize," my mother began. "You never asked," I replied simply. Just like you never asked how I managed stairs to my third-floor apartment during recovery, or how I handled the infection complications, or who drove me to my 43 follow-up appointments. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken acknowledgments. "Nevertheless," I continued, "I have given your situation careful consideration." My parents leaned forward eagerly, the momentary discomfort already forgotten in anticipation of getting what they'd come for. "I'm prepared to offer assistance, but with conditions," I said, removing the final document from my folder. "I've established what I'm calling a family responsibility fund with specific parameters." I slid the document across the table. "The fund will provide up to $50,000 toward medical expenses not covered by insurance or the clinical trial, if you choose that route. However, accessing these funds requires participation in family financial counseling and adherence to a transparent budget oversight process." My father's face flushed with indignation. "We don't need financial counseling. We need straightforward help from our daughter." "These are my terms," I replied calmly. "Additionally, I will not be offering housing to Vanessa, but I have researched affordable options in Cambridge and can provide that information if she's interested." Vanessa nodded appreciatively. "I've actually found a roommate situation in Somerville," she said. "I start a new job next week, one I got without Dad's connections or money." My mother's eyes filled with tears. Whether genuine or strategic, I couldn't tell anymore. "Natalie, we're your parents. We gave you life, raised you, provided for you. How can you treat us like business associates? I'm treating you with the same level of care and consideration you showed me when I needed you most," I replied, my voice steady despite the emotions churning beneath the surface. "This is ridiculous," my father snapped, his fragile appearance giving way to the authoritative figure I remembered. "We came to you in good faith, and you're responding with spreadsheets and conditions. 3 years ago, I went into cardiac surgery knowing my family chose a party over being with me," I said, finally allowing some of my pain to surface. "I rebuilt my life without your help or interest. I created a foundation that helps families facing medical crises. I found people who love me unconditionally." I took a deep breath. Which brings me to my final point. I withdrew the last item from my folder, a brochure for the Heart Forward Foundation, my organization. "The foundation I established has helped over 200 families navigate complex cardiac care," I explained. "We provide both financial assistance and emotional support to ensure no patient faces surgery alone." My parents looked at the brochure with confusion. "Dad, you're welcome to apply to the Foundation's assistance program like any other patient," I continued. "The application process is straightforward, and decisions are made by an independent committee based on need and circumstances." "You want your father to apply for charity from his own daughter's organization?" my mother asked incredulously. "I want him to receive help through established channels designed to maintain dignity and accountability for all parties," I corrected. "The same opportunity afforded to others in his situation." My father pushed back from the table, his face flushed with anger. "This is not what family does. This is what my family does," I replied quietly. "My chosen family respects boundaries, acknowledges harm, and supports healing, not just physically, but emotionally." "So that's it?" my mother demanded, tears now streaming down her face. "You're punishing us forever for one mistake?" "I'm not punishing you at all," I said. "I'm offering help, but on terms that protect my well-being. The choice to accept it is yours." My father stood abruptly. "Come, Eleanor." "We're not going to beg." My mother hesitated, looking between my father and me with confusion. "Thomas, maybe we should consider." "Now," he insisted, his voice sharp. As they gathered their things, my father turned to Vanessa. "Are you coming?" My sister straightened her shoulders.
"No, Dad."
"I'm staying with Natalie." His expression hardened. Then don't expect our help when this new job of yours doesn't work out. I won't, Vanessa replied simply. After they left, the private dining room fell silent. Vanessa and I sat side by side, the weight of decades of family dynamics shifting between us. Are you okay? She finally asked. I considered the question honestly. Yes, I realized. For the first time in a long time, I think I really am. 3 months later, I stood beside Maya in a small chapel, adjusting her veil before she walked down the aisle to marry Zach. Through the window, I could see Reed in the front row, saving me a seat beside him. Nervous? I asked, smoothing a stray curl from her face. Not even a little, she grinned. Some things you just know are right. As maid of honor, I'd helped plan every detail of this day, celebrating the friend who had been more family to me than my biological relatives had ever been. My parents had maintained their silence since the restaurant confrontation, though I'd received confirmation that my father had, somewhat surprisingly, enrolled in the clinical trial at Mass General. He hadn't applied to my foundation's program, his pride apparently still intact despite his medical needs. Vanessa and I had begun the slow process of rebuilding a relationship based on honesty rather than competition. Weekly coffee meetings had evolved into occasional dinners, sharing stories of our childhood from perspectives we'd never understood before. My foundation had continued to grow, recently partnering with 3 major hospitals to provide comprehensive support for cardiac patients. Just last week, we'd approved funding for a special case, a 62-year-old man with limited resources and the exact condition my father and I shared. I hadn't selected the case personally. Our committee operated independently, but I'd felt a sense of completion when I signed the approval letter. It's time, the wedding coordinator whispered, cueing the musicians. As I took my place in the procession, I caught Reed's eye across the chapel. His smile, warm, supportive, and filled with promise, reflected everything I'd built in the 3 years since I'd awakened from surgery to find myself alone. Later, during the reception, Reed pulled me onto the dance floor, his hand resting lightly over my scar through the silk of my dress. Have I told you today how extraordinary you are? He murmured. I smiled, thinking of the journey that had brought me here, not despite the scars my family had left, both physical and emotional, but because of the strength I'd found in healing them. I never would have chosen this path, I admitted, but I'm grateful for where it led me. As we swayed to the music, surrounded by the family I had chosen and who had chosen me in return, I finally felt complete. Not broken and mended, but transformed, stronger at the healed places, just as they say about broken bones. Some people spend their lives seeking approval from those who will never truly see them. I had learned a different lesson. True family is defined not by blood, but by who shows up when it matters most. What about you? Have you ever had to create boundaries with family members who took you for granted? How did you balance self-care with family obligations? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength through life's challenges. Thank you for joining me today, and remember, sometimes the family we create matters more than the one we're born into.